Hey everyone, my guest today is Mark Haraldson. Mark is a former infantryman, intelligence professional, and licensed attorney who has conducted intelligence and security operations around the world. He has trained units from the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, the Fortune 500, and police officers from over 60 departments from around the country. Mark is also a contributor to the Counter-Terrorist magazine and the host of the Pearl Snap Tactical podcast. Welcome to the show, Mark. I want to thank you for being here. And I was
Yeah.
wondering if you could tell the audience about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, my name's Mark. I started out in the military at 19. I went and joined the army, just kind of burned out with college and had a great tour. Thought I wanted to make that my career, and then just had some injuries and some things that happened that where I had to get out and really didn't have a plan B, right? So I thought, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll finish college because at that time I thought if you go to college, you'll get out and you can make a lot of money. So I graduated college and I found out you can get a degree and not make a lot of money.
Hmm.
So I bounced around just working for a couple years, and I thought I know what I'll do. I'll go to law school because if you go to law school and you become a lawyer, you'll make a lot of money. And I
Yeah.
found that you can graduate law school and not make a lot of money. So I ended up becoming working in the district attorney's office as an assistant deputy prosecutor, and I was there for about 6 years and loved it. I mean, the military was my first love, and so being in that in a prosecutor's office was probably the closest thing I found, culturally, to
Mm.
a military environment. Very deep um, camaraderie amongst your coworkers and colleagues, very collaborative and things like that. And you're fighting for a cause, right? You want what's best for your community. You're trying to protect your community and keep it safe, and working with
Hmm.
law enforcement. So I did that for 6 years, but I still had the running and gunning left in me, that it
Yeah.
was just kind of that nagging itch, I guess. And so I decided to kind of cash in my chips, and I started a security consulting business that I ran going on 12 years. And that was, just trying to marry my military experience and my law enforcement experience
Hmm.
together. And so it started out heavily training law enforcement on things like investigative practices, interrogations, and then also into counterterrorism. And then it grew into something a little bit more kinetic, where it was like counter ambush and a lot of firearms courses and working with SWAT teams and things like that. A lot of
Yeah.
traveling, but then sometimes speaking at conferences and things like that. And then I started to kind of expand our offerings, and so we kind of went more into the civilian space. And so doing a lot of whether it's combatives or firearms and things
Hmm.
like that, training, whether mainly pistol and long rifle, and then on that, it just kind of fed onto itself. And then from there, you start doing physical security consulting for businesses and churches and things like that. So those were kind of like the three buckets, I guess: law
Yeah.
enforcement, civilian, and then the consulting side. And then back in 2018, the injuries that I had, I rehabbed them ish enough that I could go
Yeah.
back in the reserve component. So I'm still serving there. So that's been another 7 years, I guess, seven somewhere. I lose count,
Yeah.
but yeah. So that's kind of where I'm. So I still get to serve. I mean, it's not the same as being on active duty, but it does, provide some of the same benefits, I guess, as far as
Yeah.
being with soldiers, doing soldier stuff, light, just not as heavy as involved as you would be on active duty and things like that. But it's been a good hitch, and it's a good
Yeah.
place for me to be. Mhm.
Yeah. Can I ask what your injuries were, if that's not too personal?
Yeah. Oh well, there's several. I had to have a couple surgeries on my ankles, and then one on my knee, and then had some back issues. Then I
Yeah.
and so yeah, but most of those are manageable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what caused them, um, but I got them rehabbed enough. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I I messed my knees up when I went from
mm,
basically one job where I was walking all day to another one where I'm going up and down stairs and jumping in and out of
Mm,
stuff, and
mhm.
you use different muscles. And then,
Yeah.
so it was pulling my kneecaps out, and it
Ooh.
took me a year before I could squat again. And
Oh,
so it's
wow.
like,
Yeah.
I can just I I understand your frustration where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
dang, body's not working with
I
me. And
know, I know, yeah, and then, we all age, right? So
yeah.
you're the wear and tear, even if you hadn't done those things, right? You still have the wear and tear. So, yeah, I'm definitely at a point in my life to where, I try to stay fit, I try to take care of
Mhm.
myself, but I still don't know what version of myself I'm gonna wake up to. So that's always kind of
Yeah.
a nerve-wracking thing. But you just decide what you want and you find a way to work around it. And that's just what I do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good you were able to find another outlet to
Yeah.
fill that spot.
Yeah.
Um, what's one lesson your job has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point?
Well, uh, I'll tell you what, I mean, this might sound like a Captain Obvious statement, but I mean, just especially working with people in a security consulting capacity, people who've been victimized or businesses
Mhm.
that have been victimized, or just from all the time of being a prosecutor. I mean, you really do not want to become a victim. I mean,
Yeah.
you just really
Yeah.
don't. There's a lot of things, people talk about self-defense and they talk, and they try to prepare for those things. And the thing is that once you, depending on the nature of the crime, right, you can't unring that bell, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if 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 someone injures you or someone takes the life of your loved one, you depending on the nature of the crime, you might get some restitution, you may not, but that is never going to undo the harm that was done to you psychologically, perhaps, maybe emotionally, those types of things. And I don't say that so that then the answer is not then to become paranoid,
Right.
or hypervigilant or anything like that, but to invest in yourself to acquire some type of skill, but
Mhm.
really just developing the soft skills of being aware to your surroundings, understanding. 90% of it, I will tell you, is just making sure you're not at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's very doable. That's very
Yeah.
doable. I think everybody, it's like your mama said, nothing good happens after midnight. And I
Yeah.
can attest to that. That's very true. And we all know there's certain parts of town that you don't need to be in. And
Mhm.
and there's certain circles that you don't need to run with, and just those
Yeah.
are just simple things that we just kind of take for granted. But I've seen time and time again where people do make a bad decision and they go someplace where they shouldn't, or
Mhm.
and they kind of expose themselves unnecessarily to certain risks, and it turns out to their detriment. And that's typically, I mean, I don't know, I don't have a hard statistic or a number that I could
Yeah.
cite you, but I would just tell you the majority of the cases I worked, I mean, that's 90% of it, we'll say. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, there is that small percentage. And of course, some of this bears out where you live, what part of the country you live in, and things like that, whether you're in an urban environment or rural or something like that.
Mhm.
But really, yes, you can still become victimized in Mayberry, in a
Yeah.
small town, but those are statistically, on the lower end of the scale, than somewhere else, right? And
Yeah.
so just having some awareness, being plugged into your environment, um, and then when your intuition, developing your intuition or things like that, and listening to your gut,
Mhm.
and being aware, that will steer you clear of a lot of the problems that you
Yeah.
have. So that's probably number one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother was just lecturing me the other day. He's like, you had a lot of people around you that you got into stupid situations that wouldn't
Yeah.
have happened if you would have been
Yeah.
hanging out with those people."
Yeah. That's
Always fun
true.
when your younger brother lectures you about
Yeah.
stuff.
Seems like a smart guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the key to becoming more resilient in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of avenues to do that depending on what type of resilience you're wanting to develop. But I mean, e- e- anything great that you want to pursue in your life is going to require some sort of sacrifice.
Mhm.
It's going to involve some type of struggle, and you have to understand that that's part of the package, right? That's not something that, you know, pain, struggle, uh, getting out of your comfort zone, those things are part of the process to get you to where you want to be. And we're living
Mhm.
in a society now that is just hyper obsessed with comfort and
Yeah.
security. And when I say security, I'm not talking about, protecting yourself against a street attacker. I'm just talking about security, about always having a safety net, always
Yeah.
having, the guarantee, and things like that. And so
Yeah.
once you step out and you want to pursue something that's viable and worthwhile, then there's going to be a price to pay. And you really have to do some soul searching. Maybe you have to do some
Mhm.
thinking and be circumspect about it, and decide if that's something you really want to do, and maybe even count the cost to a certain degree of what you're willing to give up. And if you're not willing to give up certain things, sometimes you have to say no to even good things so that you can
Yeah.
pursue the greater things. And
Yeah.
I think that's lost on a lot of people, you know, um, especially in this day and age where we just have so much comfort and so much things that we can have on demand at our fingertips, that, the desire to want to forego certain things, so
Mhm.
that we can pursue whatever our goals and objectives are. That's kind of something a lot of folks aren't kind of inclined to want to do anymore. I mean, obviously there's exceptions.
Yeah.
There's people that are out there getting after it, but there's a lot of people that could be that aren't. And that's
Yeah.
sad, I think. I think, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met people. I mean, met a lot of people that just want they always dream about more, but then if you ask them like, "Well, why don't you try for it?" "Well, I'd have to do this and this and this and this and this." "Well, then why don't you do that?" Like, why don't you make the
Yeah.
changes? And
Yeah.
I think people are afraid of change too, switching
Yeah. Oh,
stuff
for
up.
sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to that. That's what I mean about just being hyper obsessed with comfort, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that and that's part of the problem, is to understand that and or some people start a course of action and they find resistance, and they're like, "Oh man, I shouldn't have done this, and now I'm in this jam." And it's like, not necessarily. I mean, that
Yeah.
is very much part of the process, and you have to struggle. There's a ancient philosopher, one of my favorites, and I'm going to butcher his quote, because I'm going to paraphrase it, but Heraclitus, that
Okay.
said that war is the father of all things. And he's not just talking about warfare like kinetically, but he's just talking about that it's almost like a universal law, like a law of the universe, right? Just like
Mhm.
gravity, that to move out and to expand, you there has to be some sense of struggle, right? And
Yeah.
you see this in nature. I mean, just even a baby chick trying to hatch out of an egg,
Yeah.
the mother
Yeah.
hen can't peck that eggshell for it
Mhm.
has to struggle. It has to crack that shell. It has to break out, and then once it does, it's absolutely
Yeah.
exhausted, but it has to give everything it has to get out, or it's going to die.
Yeah.
And so I think we could take a lesson from nature, that it's not those are not the times to sit around and try to comfort ourselves, to feel sorry for ourselves, or to tell ourselves some story that somehow we've been victimized, but
Yeah.
instead to just switch your framework and say that is the opportunity, that is part of the catalyst, if that is going to drive you forward. And so you either have to succeed or metaphorically die trying, but it's I don't see another way. I've not
Mhm.
found another way in my life. And I think if people were honest with themselves, that if they were to attain something and that they did it without any struggle, those things tend to not mean a lot to people.
Right. Yeah.
It's the things that we had to struggle with, the things that we had to earn and fight for. Those are the things that are meaningful and that build a rich life. for
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kind of a funny story. I watched turtles hatching one time, and
Oh yeah.
I think they're false map turtles, and they would like get their head out of the egg and then pass
Hmm.
out and then wake back up and maybe get half their body out and then pass back out.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it took a long time, but
Yeah.
that's the only way to live. So
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
yeah. So what is warrior culture and why is it important?
So yeah, that's something that like on my podcast, if I can do a shameless plug for Pearl Snap
Do it.
Tactical podcast, um,
Yeah.
you know, originally we started out just doing well, like the name would imply, like tactical stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
Having to do with self defense or talking about like choosing a flashlight, a weapons mounted flashlight, or a handheld light, or that kind of stuff, or talking
Yeah.
about ambushes, or whatever could go in that category.
Uh-huh.
And I still do those, right? Those are still topics that we run. But then I started
Mhm.
really I just already kind of outed myself because I quoted Heraclitus, right? So
Mhm.
I am a history geek, and I just really have always had a love for, especially like these warrior cultures that we descend from. Our
Yeah.
ancestors came from, and looking at their virtues, the things that they prized, the things that they held dear, and just how so much of those things that made a tribe grow to a clan, to a kingdom, to a nation state, that evolved,
Mhm.
was done by holding fast to those virtues and exercising those virtues. And that in the modern world, a lot of that has atrophied. And I don't think it doesn't take a rocket science to look at society and see that there's a lot of nihilism, there's a lot of sickness, there's a lot of
Yeah.
entropy that are going down. And I think that the way to remedy that would be, to the degree that we can in a modern society, to go back and revalorize those martial culture values. And
Mhm.
so and that so yeah, so we like to look at those cultures. And me, I'm more in, there's a lot of cultures, right? There's cultures in the East, cultures in the West,
Yeah.
African culture, tribal cultures, and things like that. So they all have that milieu like running through their cultures. But you can't be an expert in all of them, or
Yeah.
I'm not holding myself as an expert. But I
Yeah.
tend to focus more on the Indo-European, and then niching down even further into the Germanic, which would be, the Germans, continental Germans, Saxons, Scandinavians, the
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxons of England, and things like that. And um, so looking at the sagas and the epics like Beowulf and stuff, and trying to tease those things out. And so sometimes I talk about those things on the podcast too.
Nice. Yeah. That'd be interesting. My family is mostly Norwegian, so we like to hear about the Vikings, even though they might
Oh
not
yeah.
have the best reputation. But I have a great nephew named Magnus, and it's just cute little Viking name for him. That
Yeah,
guy.
for sure.
So
Really
yeah.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so how does someone who's never served in the military build a warrior mindset?
Yeah, I've have had people ask me that before. I don't think that you need to be in the military to have that type of mindset or mentality. Um,
Mhm.
I think it can help, but spoiler alert, not everybody that I've ever met in the military necessarily has that mindset, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it might surprise people. Some people don't take to it, but it does provide a culture to where you can avail yourself maybe more easily than you could be than if you worked in a bank, or you
Mhm.
worked as a foreman or dishwasher or something somewhere. But that notwithstanding, you can still pursue that. You can still develop that within yourself. There's a
Yeah.
there's a couple ways to do it. I mean, first you've got to find out, well, what is a warrior? What is your definition of a warrior, and where
Mhm.
would you find that? And for me, like I said, I found part of that in history of my ancestors. right? And pursuing
Yeah.
their stories and finding those things and finding, themes, things that were important to them, how they struggled, how they fought, what their ideals of courage and honor and loyalty and faithfulness,
Mhm.
those types of things, and starting to live that. But then there's also the other part is that, well, what does the warrior do? And they fight. I mean, they struggle.
Yeah.
They develop themselves physically, mentally, and spiritually so that they could prevail in those battles. And so, you're
Mhm.
not going to be on a battlefield anymore with a spear and a shield or anything like that. But we still have battles in our own lives,
Yeah.
all of us, that are metaphorically. And so I find that those myths and those poems or those writings, they're not just stories for entertainment, they're not just stories for inspirations, but they really do provide a template for action, in your
Mhm.
life. And so, if you're not used to reading those stories and seeing those themes, they can be lost on you at first. But as you read them and you really just kind of immerse yourself in them, then you start seeing patterns. You start seeing
Yeah.
things come up over and over again, and then you just start finding, well, how does that apply to my life?
Yeah.
And how can I incorporate that in? And I think, you know, but at some point you do have to decide, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking earlier, right? So once you've done all that, you've done that homework, right? Then you're
Mhm.
going to have to be tested, right? The warrior's always got to be tested, right? That's in every
Yeah.
story, right?
Right.
He's young, he's untested, nobody gives him any respect or gives her respect or whatever, and then there's this quest that person has to go on, and they're
Yeah.
unsure of themselves, they don't have the right kind of skills. So then usually in the story there's usually some mentor that pops up that gives them, depending on what the story is, some magical weapon or some type of,
Yeah.
advice or whatever. But then they have to push that forward and they have to go on, they have to cross the threshold and the things like that. And so for you, you meaning, the listeners or people in general, is that,
Mhm.
it's that call to adventure. There's something in your heart that is aching right now. That's something that you want to see lived or accomplished in your life. And that's
Mhm.
different for everybody. But you have to, and nobody, you have to find out what that is. And nobody can answer that for you. The mentor can't, the mentor can help, it can give you advice, can give you maybe even some type of training, and the mentor can be a job. The mentor can be a profession. The mentor,
Yeah.
in modern day, it doesn't have to, it could be a group of people. It could be several people. It doesn't have to be, some Yoda that pops up that, type of thing. But
Yeah.
then you're going to have to be tested. You're going to have to go forward. And then it gets back to what we said earlier. You're going to have to encounter, in the stories it's usually a monster or some villain, right? Well, you
Yeah.
you have obstacles, you have crises, you have struggles, you have things that you're going to have to surmount, and you're going to have to overcome. And it's a very lonely experience because even if you do it with a group, ultimately it's you have to do it for yourself, and that's part of it. That's
Mhm.
part of it. So that's a long-winded way to answer your question, but I think,
Sorry.
I don't think there's a as much as I would like to articulate just like, hey, do these three things, or, do X. And I think it's more holistic than that, and it just is going to require you kind of bringing together. I think there's typically a physical component to it,
Yeah.
there's a mental component and an emotional or spiritual component to it, and that those things need to be integrated together, right, for you to
Mhm.
truly overcome. Because if you don't, this is what oftentimes happens, and I see this with people I know, people you probably know too, that, someone does embark on that quest, right? They want to be someone who goes and really rises up in the ranks in their company, right? And they give their whole
Yeah.
life to it, and they burn relationships, and they ruin their family over it, but they made a lot of money, right? And then
Yeah.
at the end of it, they look and say, well, what was that all for? And then they end up doing something stupid and childish, when we call those midlife crises, right?
Yeah.
Is a nice way to do that, right? And that's because, they either they were pursuing someone else's dream or something that they thought because society handed it to them and said, "Oh, this is what's important for you." And so
Mhm.
they buy into the program, but that wasn't what they needed to do for them, maybe. There's a
Yeah.
number of reasons, but I think the big thing is as you pursue whatever your goals and objectives are, you really do need to bring all everything to the table, and that's your physical, your mental, and spiritual aspects of yourself to it, so that when you do accomplish it, you don't turn around and say, "Well, now what?" or "What was that
Yeah.
for?" or "Yeah, I should have gone a different route," or that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kinda made a point about, doing things for other people. I think a lot of just seeing in college, I think a lot of people will do things in their life for other people. Like, they'll go to
Mhm.
college because that's not so much anymore, but that's what was told
Yeah.
that you had to do to be successful, and I think that's why we see, um a lot of people not using their college degree, a lot of people
Mhm.
not, um, ever graduating, just racking up student debt, and it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but I was told if I took a year break that I'd never go back," and which just
Yeah. Yeah.
is not true, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it doesn't have to be true, if that's like I took a break, right? When I was
Mhm.
19, I was halfway through my sophomore year and I decided to go to the military and yeah, I had those same people telling me, "Oh man, you should finish college first and you should." But if you know what you want, I knew
Yeah,
I wanted to finish college. I just knew I didn't want to do it then. I knew I
yeah,
wanted to go to the military, and so I did, and I did go back to college because that's something I wanted to do. That was important to me,
yeah,
so I found a way because, I did a lot of things wrong in my youth. I mean, let's get that clear. But,
yeah,
but I did have some guideposts along the way that I was orienting myself towards
mhm,
and making sure that those were priorities and I was making those things happen.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I went back to school back to college at the age of 30, and it's I had to kind of play some catch up because
Mhm.
there was so much time in between, and then also when I didn't really know what I wanted to do, I wasn't performing very well,
Right.
and so then
Yeah.
I had to do some catch up with my GPA as well, and it's like, "Dang,
Mhm.
if I
Yeah.
would've just taken my own advice and done
Yeah.
what I wanted to do instead of wasting 2 years of messing around."
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, people don't listen to themselves, and and that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because
Mhm.
there is that part of you. I don't care who you are. I mean, there is that part of you at some point that is wanting to play it safe, that doesn't want to risk.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something that and that's a part of your conscience that's there, that's designed to try to protect you. But
Mhm.
sometimes it becomes like an overbearing mother hen, right?
Yeah.
That's trying to protect you against everything. And then what it's doing is it winds up stifling you. So learning to balance, those that primal urge within you to go forth and conquer something, right?
Mhm.
Versus the other part of aspect of yourself that's telling you to hold back a little bit is to learn to balance that because to go the other way is to be reckless and that's not good
Yeah.
either, right? So
Yeah.
to say, I said earlier about not being afraid not to have a safety net or things like that. Well, but you can't be reckless either, and so it's
Mhm.
difficult, and that's the struggle. That's part of the struggle too, right? And so
Yeah.
learning to listen to those things, but listen to find the balance, to find which is the right route to pursue, and to do it
Mhm.
smart, and to take risks, but you have to take educated risks. You have to take calculated risks with the understanding that sometimes those don't work out,
Yeah.
right? But even within failure, you can still find an opportunity. You can still find a new direction. And sometimes your failure is just feedback. It's just telling you that that's not the right way to go about it. You're not out of the
Yeah.
fight. It's just you're not going to achieve it that way. So you have to pivot a little bit. And it's hard because there's not a bright line rule on that, and
Yeah.
it's something that, again, it just comes down to struggle, being comfortable with a certain amount of ambiguity in life, which is what life is, and just continually pressing forward, right? But it all starts with being clear with what you want. If you're not clear about what you want, then you're just going to be spinning.
Mhm. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about my sponsors real quick. Sometimes I get on a roll cleaning or gardening, and I need a boost but don't have time for a meal. Big Fork Brand's pork jerky is the perfect choice to keep my momentum, offering high protein snacks for on the go energy boosts. Not only do they offer pork jerky, but they also make pork sticks, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, and burger and hot dog sauces. Products come in a variety of delicious flavors, including Thai green curry and maple and brown sugar for the meat options, and gangster and Chicago fire for the sauces. I personally think the original flavor of the pork jerky hits just right after tackling a big chore. It's a little salty and very flavorful. My discount code gives you 20% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit bigforkbrands.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Are you looking for a gift for a music lover, or maybe some apparel to show off your quirky side? Old Glory has you covered. With over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture, you're guaranteed to find the perfect item. They even have seasonal gear. My husband enjoys the Beatles and Led Zeppelin apparel, and I love the Billy Idol apparel. I even found items for my fellow plant enthusiasts. This family-owned superstore is known for their quality and customer service, offers free standard shipping on all orders, and orders are shipped the same day you purchase. My discount code gives you 15% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit oldglory.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Looking for a game-changing way to improve your health? Zevo Life is the world's most nutrient-dense whole plant, packed with over 50% plant protein, essential amino acids, fiber, and antioxidants. Harnessing the best nature has to offer, Zevo Life nourishes your body while driving your performance, vitality, and overall well-being. Each serving is a concentrated source of clean, well-balanced nutrition designed to support modern lifestyles, and just 1 teaspoon a day supports your gut, boosts energy, and promotes healthier skin and hair. It's no wonder that it's receiving rave 5-star reviews. Step into a healthier future with a 30% discount and a 30-day risk-free guarantee by visiting zivo.life and using my promo code. To support my show and to receive 30% off your entire order, enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. So you do tactical training or
Mhm,
firearm training, right?
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, can you tell the audience about that a little bit? And if they wanted to get started in doing something like that, how would they go about it?
Yeah, that's I get so I would start with, making sure that you understand about yourself, like what is this that you're wanting out of it?
Mhm.
What, like, if you're approaching it, because firearms are a pretty powerful tool, and they've got to be handled properly, and so safety, that's like the number one thing, right? You have to respect this thing. um and then from there you have to pursue some skills. So it's always best if you find someone who's already kind of in that space.
Mhm.
Kind of hate to use that word, it sounds so corporate, but
It's okay.
it works, right? But
Yeah.
someone who is knowledgeable, who already kind of knows, that's competent with that
Mhm.
can maybe instruct you, or to seek out a qualified instructor. I think that, man, I you got to do that, right? That's not, a firearms. I don't think that's something that is wise to pursue some type of self-taught program on.
Yeah.
You
Right.
that's something that, you can do that with a lot of different subjects, but that's one that you really do need to find someone who's qualified to teach you,
Mhm.
right? And to help you select the right firearm for you, and
Yeah.
that's geared to your needs. and then you need to practice with it.
Yeah.
And the practice doesn't always mean going to the range and shooting actual rounds. If you talk to anybody that's like in a profession of arms that's
Mhm.
serious about it, or someone who's a competitive shooter, even, I mean, they would tell you that most of their training involves what's called dry fire. And
Okay.
dry firing is just basically, you can do that in your home, uh, but that's basically where you are practicing all the things that you would do just without the ammunition.
Okay.
So, drawing from the holster, or if you're drawing from concealment, or practicing what's called your drawn presentation, which is just really getting the gun up on the target and aligning, the
Uh-huh.
sights with your eyes to the target, um, your trigger squeeze, your reloadings, dealing with jams and malfunctions, all that kind of stuff can be done in a dry fire environment. And those people would tell you that's where most of the learning, that's where most of the expertise is built. And
Yeah.
then you go to the range, and really, once you go to the range and you are shooting actual live rounds out of it, then you're working on your recoil,
Uh-huh.
management, and your trigger manipulation, those types of things. And so and you do need both. You need the dry fire, and you do have to spend some time at the range, but most of the magic happens there at in your home or wherever you decide to safely dry fire. Now, I will say this, and I always say this as a caveat. I'll tell you what I do when I dry fire. So this is where something bad can happen if you're not
Uh-huh.
diligent, right? Because you have a
Okay.
firearm, you're going to
Yeah.
be pointing it, you may be pulling the trigger, and it's dry. So
Yeah.
you have to check,
Yeah.
recheck, and triple check to make sure the magazines are empty, the weapon is empty,
Mhm.
and whatever you're pointing that thing at, that needs to be some type of load bearing wall, so that if you do mess up, that round is not going to exit or leave the wall, right?
Yeah.
And go out
Yeah.
and hurt somebody. So you have to really, really be diligent about that. So me
Yeah.
personally, I don't dry fire in a room that has ammo in it. I have a dedicated space where I do my dry fire training. There is no ammunition in that room, but even though that's my protocol, I still check, recheck,
Yeah.
and I check everything. Right.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine that was a U.S. Marshal, and he was joking, and he was saying that he did he told me the agency, I'm not going to put them on blast, but he was some guys who, while they were traveling on duty
Uh-huh.
from a federal agency, put a hole through a TV screen in their hotel, right?
Oh my
And
god.
that just, and that's someone who's a quote unquote professional. So if it can
Yeah.
happen with the professional, it can definitely
Yeah.
happen with the civilian, right? So that's not a time to be to have any sense of bravado with it, but just to be safe. It doesn't take that long to be diligent, and just do it every time. Just always
Yeah.
treat it with respect, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I it was making me think of Alec Baldwin and that, um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just
mess.
yeah,
Uh,
stuff happens, right? And
yeah.
so, yeah. But,
Yeah.
and then there's books, there's, that can help you with draw fire. There's a guy that's a competitive shooter. I don't know him personally. He has no idea who I am, but his name's Ben Stoger. He's written a lot of books. I've found them very useful. I like how he
Mhm.
articulates stuff. I've used some of his material in my classes before.
Yeah.
He's really good. There's another really good book by another. I don't think he's not on the competitive shooter circuit anymore, but his name's Brian Enos. One of the
Okay.
best books I've ever written, or I've ever read. I wish I could write books, but that I've ever read on the topic, just in the way that he articulates things, because he'll
Yeah.
really tell you about what type of feedback you're looking for, what should be going on in your mind while you're practicing, and what shouldn't be going on in your mind while you're practicing, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
if someone wants to really, really pursue it, really become a student of the gun, then you're going to have to do like you would any other pursuit, right?
Mhm.
You're going to have to get the right equipment. You're going to have to train, and then you're going to have to
Yeah.
study, and whether it's books and videos, and then can't emphasize enough. You have to go to a qualified instructor and just get that in person
Yeah.
uh, training.
Yeah. Yeah, I have I bought what the heck is it? Some Ruger SR-22 handgun
Hmm.
for it, and this was a while ago. It was just basically just for protection. I had had a
Hmm.
taxi driver drop me off at home and then like 10 minutes later try and like get back into my house because
Oh
he could tell
wow,
I was home by myself and he didn't get in the house. But all I had was a steak knife for protection at the time.
wow,
And I lived
yeah,
out in the country. So waiting for cops to get out there was terrifying. And
yeah,
so I'm like, okay, you need to get something. And
yeah,
when I got it, I'm well trained on, or I felt like I could handle it really well. Well, that it's been years now. So if I
mm,
were to pick it up now, I mean, I have a husband that can handle that stuff now, but
yeah,
I think it's something that I should I should go back and get myself reacquainted with it and handling it
yeah.
well in
It's
case
a
I
I
do
mean,
need it
it
someday.
is a perishable skill, right? But it can come back to you, right? And you everyone has, like I said earlier, everyone has goals and objectives with anything that they pursue. Some people want to
Mhm.
take it, see what's the furthest I can go with this. Other people just like, hey, I want something at home so that if something happens, I can take care of myself. And so,
Yeah.
those two folks don't necessarily have to have the same training track, right? And so,
Right.
even with your dry fire practice, 10 minutes a day. If you can't do 10 minutes, do 5 minutes.
Mhm.
If you can't do 10 minutes a day, do 10 minutes 3 times a week. I mean, what is that optimal? Well, maybe not, but it's better than not doing it at all. Right.
Right.
And so,
Right.
I think most people could find 5 minutes out of their day. Most people could find 10 minutes a few
Mhm.
times a week, just something. It would, you'd be surprised what you can, how much you can accomplish in even just a short amount of time, because it's really more about the frequency of it
Yeah.
than the volume,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
what your goals are. I mean, you're not going to win a gun competition, if you go competitive doing that, but
Yeah.
you can become, um you can over time reach some level of competency just for your protection in your home,
Yeah.
right, versus
Right.
not doing anything at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, even like my husband and all his friends, they're hunters and, every year they're out there practicing
Hmm.
for hunting
Hmm.
season because
Mhm.
you gotta get it's like muscle memory almost, right? Like you
Yeah.
kinda
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you want the audience to know or anything else you'd like to say about your podcast?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would just invite anybody that's interested in any of the things that we talked about to just go look at Pearl Snap Tactical. It's on Substack is probably my biggest hub where most
Mhm.
of my activity is as far as like posting things and like
Yeah.
social media aspect of it. But it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's pretty much
Okay.
anywhere you get your podcast, you could check it out. And there's a whole range of topics there that I think that's going to interest that someone will find interesting if they find any of this interesting at all.
Yeah. So, okay, so you go into tactical gear. And you said
Mhm.
you do go into some history on
Oh
it
yeah,
as well?
yeah. There's a
Yeah.
good mix. I mean, right now, so our first season was kind of more heavy on the I guess your tactical subjects, type of things.
Mhm.
Talking about low light encounters or um, pistol 101 or those types of things.
Yeah.
And then I do every once in a while I'll drop out kind of one of those mindset. There's plenty of mindset stuff there. There's also stuff that's kind of contemporary stuff. I mean, I've done stuff
Mhm.
on insurgencies, is and looking at insurgencies across the world and what kind of patterns are going on here as we experience civil unrest and things like
Yeah.
that, not calling things here an insurgency, but just looking at the principles and seeing so that you have a way to interpret the news, right? Instead of having someone
Hmm.
feed it to you and give you a narrative, you can just look at it and analyze it yourself. Those types of things. There's some topics on terrorism and stuff like that. And then also, I've been trying to, just from, I really started out with the podcast as a way for the people who came to our classes to get the other info that is related to the firearm stuff, but not stuff
Yeah.
that we could talk about, so there's situational awareness, things like that.
Yeah.
Because you can talk during the break and everything, but when people come to your class, they don't want to sit and listen to you talk all day. They want you to tell them, here's this next drill we're going to do. This is why we're doing this drill. This is what this will develop for you. This is how you do
Yeah.
it. These are the standards we're going for. And then letting people do it, right? They don't, but they were interested in those kinds of things. So
Right.
that's why I kind of created that podcast, was for them.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of took off from there. And so I'm also looking at things like military tactics, right? Because you can learn the technique of self-protection, but
Hmm.
the way that you apply that has to do with your tactical acumen, right? And that's something
Yeah.
that a lot of folks don't get into with their classes. And so I started taking like military tactics and saying, okay, well, tactics are they operate according to universal principles. So what that means is the principle is there, but it's going to be applied differently whether you're in a law enforcement environment, in a military environment, or you're a civilian concealed carry holder. So the
Yeah.
tactics will be the same. They're just going to look different because of their application. And so trying to take topics like that and trying to explain, what tactics are, how they look on a military level, and then I'll always drill it down to a law enforcement and civilian level, because that's who listens. Those are the three groups that listen to our podcast. So
Right.
yeah, there's a wide range of topics, but all within that umbrella that people can listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you have a little bit of something for
Yeah.
everyone to check out.
Yeah, I would try to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. I will keep in touch.
All right,
All
thanks.
right.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too.